Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Westworld Season 1, Episode 5. It's called Contrapasso. Full spoilers for the episode, as always. Connor, the plot is thickening.
Oh, it really is. There's so many things in this one.
And I want to start with the big debate, right? Which is going to
Okay.
upset some people. Because there was some comments on last week's video saying that this theory that the man in black is actually William is complete nonsense, as if we shouldn't even be talking about it, as if it's a done deal, it's not a thing. And I
hmm
was close to believing that, actually, especially last week. In fact, someone in the comments even brought up some hard-hitting evidence from last week that completely said it couldn't be true.
Okay. Because I was last week. I was saying I was flip-flopping all episode.
And the evidence from last week, now, see what you think of this. So, the man in black last week ran across Teddy. Teddy was off hunting for Wyatt because that was the new game, or the new storyline from Ford.
Yeah.
And we were led to believe that that's why Dolores goes back to the bandits, is because Teddy wasn't there to play out the days per usual.
Sure.
Which would lead them to believe that these two timelines are happening. It's the same timeline, it's the same time period, because she runs out
I
into
mean,
the forest and runs into William.
you could argue that by simply saying this was before Teddy, that part of the loop hadn't been created yet, where he goes back to her.
I think there's a couple of ways you could argue. You could argue it's just being manipulative and making you think, because she just runs out of the forest. She could have ran from anywhere. And
Yeah.
part of what I thought this episode is, Logan even says to William in the last episode, he said, do you think it's a coincidence that the one thing you've smelled at is just shown up out of the blue? I mean, what if he's right? What if that's why she's there? It's not because of what we've seen from the other scenes. But that was from last week. And that was fairly convincing. It was, the logic stands, right?
Sure.
There was a lot of things in this episode that was really making me doubt that it wasn't true.
Again, I'm torn all over again because it started. Where you have Logan and William talking, and he says, "Oh yeah, they're talking about their company buying the place."
Yeah.
And they say, "Oh, since the company's in the park's in free fall since it opened," and the way they're talking about it, it's like
It doesn't sound
this
that
can't have been
old.
hemorrhaging cash this long. It wouldn't have survived 30 years.
Yeah, it doesn't. They very specifically never talk about length of time. It's all very. It could be any amount of time.
But it's the way they mention that it's since Arnold died, right? Is when the cash
Whose name they don't know.
they don't know, right?
Yeah.
But they say, oh, that's when they started having cash issues, right? But 30 years like that seems a bit unlikely.
I don't know if they specifically say they've been hemorrhaging money since that incident. Just to be particular
Okay.
about the facts, I don't think he specifically says that. I think they're two separate
Right,
statements.
okay.
He says they're hemorrhaging money, and he explains this part of the backstory. I don't know if they're linked necessarily.
Just seems strange to put them in one sentence together, like if they're not linked.
Um, However, that also links to something that happened in a scene that was later on in the episode. A big scene, of course, where Ford sits down and has a drink with the man in black,
Yeah.
and Teddy's just sitting there doing whatever Teddy does. And one of the lines that Man in Black says, it's really, really fascinating. They clearly know each other. That's immediately clear. They don't seem to like each other very much. That's also reasonable to accept here. But Man in Black says, Arnold 30 years ago tried to destroy this park. Because there was a line earlier on in the episode that made me think, oh, did Arnold try to destroy it? But then later on he just flat out said it, that he did try and destroy the park.
Yeah.
And he would have done if it wasn't for me. First of all, huge line, right? So much of the backstory just come flooding in. So I want to look at that line mixed with the other line from the William Ford scene where he says they're hemorrhaging money. Is that how he ended up saving them 30 years ago?
That's what I was thinking, because the way he says, "Oh, he would have succeeded if not for me," implies that he was physically stopping Arnold doing something, but
Yeah,
maybe it's not.
Which it could be as well, but at the same time, though, they say in that scene that the co-founder, the co-creator's already killed himself.
Exactly.
So that doesn't quite add up. But then there's other things that thematically link everything together.
Do you know one of the things that made me flip flop though?
Yeah.
Again, right. So after that scene where they're talking about hemorrhaging money, it cuts to Man in Black, and they meet the child that Ford spoke to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because that was definitely present day. That when he spoke to the child, because it was the burnt down church steeple,
Which
right?
makes sense, because if it's two timelines, the Man in Black would be the present day one,
Yeah,
because he's the older one.
yeah. But it's like, why is that? That like, it's just making me think.
You think that's like a sign of he's definitely present day? That's them telling you without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah,
This is, I mean, even if it wasn't, you know that as soon as he talks to Ford later, it has to
yeah,
be
yeah.
present day.
But early on, like, it's
Yeah,
like it has to be.
maybe. Another big thing is Lawrence, of course, who he's like the leader of this town that Logan wanted to go to, and they find that he's like the guy running everything. And this happens right after the scene, well, not right after, but more or less pretty soon after the scene where we see Man in Black kill him.
Leaves him just hanging.
Now, this is something that could play two ways. You could say, oh, they've just reset him, they've come along, they've cut him down, they've patched them up, or maybe they've got duplicates, I don't know, it doesn't seem like they do, but, and they've loaded him into the storyline that he was in, because, I mean, there was a reason why he was been hanged when we first met him. You know, he was obviously a criminal.
And just to say that, even if it's not 30 years apart, like, there's nothing to suggest they're absolutely simultaneous.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, just quickly on another HBO show, Game of Thrones does this where there's scenes that happen like months apart, even though it cuts between them and it plays like they're simultaneous.
Yeah, but this is good.
So was that.
I'm gonna get so much hate for that comment.
Yeah.
I don't like Game of Thrones, folks. I'm sorry, I just don't. Anyway, so there's that, right? But you could also say, but that was a bit quick. Like you could almost take that as a bit of evidence. In fact, we get a pretty hefty comment from someone before we even recorded this video about theories on this episode. Some of which I thought of as well, and but this was one of the facts that he brought up was this quick, just how he immediately was there, like, and it didn't even seem like a whole day had passed or anything like that. It seemed like, you know, if it is going concurrently, this is proof that the timelines aren't in sync. There's
Yeah, and it would be really nice the way he introduced himself to William, and then it's like that's how he first met him.
Well, this kind of makes sense because Man in Black constantly says how Dolores and Lawrence have been like the two characters he's always interacted with in the park. Every time he speaks to them, he talks about them as if he's known them the longest.
Yeah.
And this could almost be his first event. If he is William, this is his first time. And then another thing is that William, over the course of this episode, does have a couple of moments where he gets darker, where Dolores is about to get shot at that like fake, you know, robbery or whatever. He like pulls out his gun and like saves her and like shoots the other two guys. You know.
It's also just to go back to the Ford conversation. He mentions how he's the villain because he feels like Ford never created a decent one. So it's like he's doing it as a service to the park, almost like that's his job almost.
Yeah, which kind of links up with what William's saying as he's walking around earlier on. He says, whoever created this place didn't really think about humans much. He talks about how all of it's kind of like a game, and he seems very critical of it and how sort of barbaric it all seems.
Yeah, and then there was something that threw me off though.
Go on.
When he's talking to Dolores, right, as William, he mentions the outside world, and she picks up on it.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, I thought you weren't supposed to notice that." And it's kind of played. I can see it going two ways. I can see where you're going. There's one. The more thing that you're supposed to assume is, oh, she's developing. But what if it's just they haven't adapted her enough yet?
Right, that leads me into two different points. Okay, one is that the Man in Black says that when he first came here, the hosts weren't as realistic. They were parts and mechanical and stuff. And then eventually says that to cut costs, that this actually just making like a fake flesh was cheaper. Like they became more human-like, you know, with actual skeletons and, you know, muscles and whatever. And that doesn't quite sync up with Williams in the past, and that's his first story, because none of them seem... Like, they still seem lifelike, they still seem like they're flesh, and then when they get shot, there's still blood squirting out.
It is well known. He says he opened them up to have a look.
True.
And we haven't seen him do that yet.
Also true, Dolores has a weird moment when she goes into the card reader, you know, the fortune teller, where she seemingly pulls like a mechanical like wire out of her arm, and it goes away. It's like a almost like she's having a daydream, and it like snaps out, and she like realizes it's not real. Which leads to a theory about Dolores that came from this comment, In fact, I'm going to give you the name because this is actually quite good. Metal Monkey is the commenter. Um, Basically, he had this idea that Dolores is unreliable as a point of view, and that what we may be perceiving as like her like coming out of what, because in this episode specifically we see her faint in the like that parade, and we even hear Ford's voice like giving her like a command to go to sleep as she's
Yeah.
like fading away. What if they're intentionally tricking us, and every time she's talking to someone in the lab, the control rooms or whatever, what if that is present day, but the stuff in the past isn't? What if the stuff in the past is like the reason why she's having these weird flashes back and forth is because it's actually the present day Dolores like having weird flashes to back in this time and
It's like
back.
corrupted memory.
Yeah, because they talk a lot about her memory and how it's all there. Like Ford calls it a walled garden when he talks to her. And then the other thing that kind of has me lean. Well, there's actually not two things. The smaller one is so William and Ford have this tussle almost where not Ford, sorry, William
Logan.
and Logan, yeah. Too many characters. And Logan like belittles him. He's like, "You came to my company and you got this promotion. That's the furthest you're ever going to go. You were standing in your cheap little black suit."
Yeah.
And that almost feels so obvious that I almost go 180. I'm like, that's not him. It can't be.
Yeah.
It's too
It
obvious.
feels like it's too self-referential to it.
But it shows that growing disdain. And what if this is the drive that causes William to take over this company, and that's how he financially helps them save the park? You know, what if it's not so much that Arnold? I mean, maybe Arnold was already dead, but it was more that, like you kind of suggested earlier on, that the Arnold's death was a chain of events that led to the park starting to lose money, and therefore it was still him that came in and saved it. You know, a few years later.
This has just reminded me of something. So we were always under the impression that Dolores, obviously, they mentioned how she's like the oldest, that she's always been around, and we got the impression it was because Ford wanted to keep her around, right?
Yeah.
Like, until
yeah.
this episode where he's like, "No, we're not friends," and it's almost like he could say, "But we are enemies," sort of thing. Like that's
Yeah,
the
that
way he
was
plays it.
that line was very you can't say that at all, Dolores. You can't say that, and that's what almost makes me think that if this is in the past and this is William's first trip here as the Man in Black, then whatever Dolores is doing and going off script, because Ford even when he's talking to her goes, "Oh, you're having one of your off loop
Yeah, it's happened
things."
before.
Yeah, and it almost made me think that this was Arnold programmed something into her for her to do, and this is why this is the ultimate bit of evidence that makes me think thematically it works that he's the Man in Black, is that when they escape on that train and they're with Lawrence, and on the coffin is the maze, and Dolores keeps talking about the maze. She keeps saying that I have to find the end of the maze and things like that in this episode. And I'm like, what if this is how the Man in Black knows about the maze? What if Dolores gets so lifelike and human in this like adventure and talks about this maze and they try and find this maze, that he sees this spark of life that's real, and he's already kind of taken with her. He's already said in the episode that he just seems to kind of understand or be self-aware more than the others do. He notices that. So what if this is the story that makes him obsessed and makes him want to keep coming back, and it makes him want to save the park, makes him want to be obsessed with it, come back and find the answer later, like 35 years later.
It's also what I was saying about how why Dolores is still around
Yeah.
and not been retired, even though Ford seems like he doesn't particularly like her. Like he hasn't got the attachment that it was implied. What if it's that William, after he saved it as a condition, meant that she always had to be around, like they couldn't replace her and get rid of her?
And again, if he saved the park, that makes sense. That guest gets whatever he wants. That whole
Yeah.
thing. Um,
I want to talk about the mystic bit.
yeah, go on.
There was, because I was playing that in a different way as well. If we assume it's present day, and
Okay.
this is, so we spoke last week about how she was developing consciousness, or how she was hearing the voice of God essentially, and it was like how she would rationalize it, and how that was the first step to hearing her own voice as a conscious thought. The way she sees the mystic, she sees herself. It's like she's literally telling herself. It's her giving herself a thought, but rationalizing it in a way that she can comprehend as a vision rather than just an internal thought.
I like that. I don't think that necessarily suggests present day though. I mean, that could be
That's true.
She could have went through this process already, and all this present day stuff with them like analyzing hers, like.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And also, if it is different timelines, it would explain why, like last week and the week before, that Bernard got her down, and it felt weird that she left in the middle of whatever was going on. I was like, well, maybe she didn't. Maybe this was a different time.
Yeah, because I think I mentioned that last week that it was weird that to take her out of that where she, after she ran into them in the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
No, it's interesting stuff there.
But her falling asleep and then waking up in the dream thing does almost seem like they're trying to tell us it's not. But that makes me think, well, wait a minute, you're tricky. You're trying to,
yeah, it feels like you're hinting it too much.
yeah, you're trying to avoid us figuring it out. Maybe there. But fascinating episode. There was so much to pack in. The last thing that Metal Monkey brought up that was interesting is that he compared her to Elliot, just in the sense that, and that's Elliot from Mr. Robot, for those of you who don't watch that, in the sense that she is unreliable as a narrator because her mind is so corrupted and it's not, thinking straightforward.
It's a plausible theory, more so than many others we've seen.
Yeah, and you can almost buy that in present day, when we finally, if this is true, the moment we finally run into Dolores with the Man in Black or whatever, and it doesn't link up with the past stuff, and it becomes clear that there's two things going on, that should be quite a big moment. If it's true, if this is all false, and it could be, like there's enough doubt, there's enough logical things in there to suggest that it's not, but I'm starting to like the idea because there's all these things that we're linking up and saying, this is the start of the story, this is him getting this drive, seeing this maze, finding this real spark of humanity. Because even in the Man in Black in present day, I think he says he's looking for something real. I think he says that word.
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating, isn't it?
And maybe that's why he is obsessed with her and why he keeps going back to her, because she showed him that sign of life. Maybe Lawrence does too. Maybe we see something like that with him at some point along the journey.
Perhaps, yeah.
I don't know. It's it's really good. There was a lot of nudity in this one.
Yeah, there was.
There was orgies upon orgies. There was giant big dick in your face, which I'm glad that Elsie made a comment about it because it broke the tension a little bit. Like that's really in my face right now.
That's a massive dong right there.
Yeah. So she comments on it, which leads me to the subplot with the what do they call them? The butchers,
Yes.
sort of the techies who like cut them up and repair them and dig out bullets and all that kind of thing. And it's the same ones from before when Maeve woke up, and we see Maeve like there just on the slab, like knocked out, as if she keeps getting shot and killed, and she comes back a few times throughout the episode. But we see this subplot of one of them is trying to train himself to be a programmer, or one of the people who works with the computers and the hosts. Because he's like stolen this bird and one of the data tablets, and he's trying to like tinker with it to get it to work.
Coders is what they call them.
Coders, yeah.
I have a theory about him though. I think he's a robot.
Is this because Maeve comes in and he gets like this weird deja vu thing?
No.
No.
Although
Okay.
that's part of it.
All right. Okay. Give me your theory.
It's when the other butcher flips out. So you know when he first tries to do the thing with the bird, and the other one comes in, he's like, "Nah, you can't be a coder. You're a butcher. That's all you ever can be." It's like he's having dreams, and that's another thing that's in this episode quite a lot. The idea that they dream of being more, and I feel like that he's on that path to, he can do more than just be a butcher.
I can see it. I can see them like using hosts to actually do all that work, because it's kind of unpleasant for people if you think about it. All this cutting up.
Which I can see the other one being human, like as to have like an overseer,
a supervisor, yeah.
Yeah, and then,
although they're not. Even if that's the case, though, there's at least one more that's not human, that is human, because the other guy that Elsie blackmails to get a bit of time with the host that tried to kill her last week, she blackmails him with security footage of him humping one of the dead hosts before they get turned back on.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's just they fill out the ranks with some robots.
Yeah, maybe. I like that idea. I'm not like 100% on it, but
No, neither am I. I'm not saying it's absolute.
I can see it work.
So.
And the reason why I think it's maybe interesting if it isn't is because of the way the story goes. Because I think the moment with the bird's quite beautiful, actually, when he finally gets it working. This is the end of the episode, and Maeve's like just sitting there, and it's uber creepy. And she's like, "It's time that we had a chat," or something to that effect. And I think the idea that I suppose it's interesting as well if he is secretly also a host, but that he ends up helping her, or maybe he forms like a connection with her the way that Bernard has with Dolores,
Mm.
where he tries to help. And I took the idea that she came in like 3 times in this episode. Like once they fixed her, and then she was back almost immediately. I took this as her repeatedly like getting herself shot or whatever because she was still experimenting like she was at the end of the last episode.
Yeah, I was actually assuming this was week long cycles that we were seeing
Oh, right, okay.
because obviously we know that gang that comes in and shoots up the town. That's supposed to happen every week.
That's true. Yeah.
So I assumed each time we saw it, we were actually moving forward a week.
That could be the case, but they can also just be shot by guests or
Yeah, they
various other things. So I was thinking it was more a sign that it was a short period of time, but she kept coming in because she was trying to like keep coming back here. She wanted to try and catch them in a way.
Yeah, that's possible.
But no, that was again very interesting. Very beautiful moment with the bird. I'm sure there's probably more in the conversation with Ford and the Man in Black that we need to delve into.
The thing I love about that is after, and he kind of unfreezes time and he points to the piano, and it plays, but it doesn't play as nicely as it was before. There's a lot more dissonance going on than there was before. It's a lot more chaotic, and it's like he interferes, but he kind of makes things more chaotic than they were if he hadn't.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What I really what I really like as well is this idea that the hosts are trained to protect him at all costs. So even though Teddy's faking dying, as it were, because that's like what he should be doing given the injuries he's got, he like snaps into action the moment that the Man in Black threatens him.
Yeah, as soon as that knife comes out, he's on it.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Also, as a little touch actually, one of the big theories about this whole Man in Black is William thing was the idea of the hats and the good and the evil, the white and black hats. On that subject, I think it's interesting that Dolores chose a brown hat.
Yeah, it's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, it's in the middle. It's is she good? Is she bad?
I also noticed as William's starting to do more things, his hat's kind of getting a bit dirtier. It's getting a bit grimier.
It's getting darker as it goes.
It's literally getting darker.
Yeah. And even the choice that he chooses not to save Logan when he's getting beat up by the hosts is a little bit. Now I assume that like security would step in at some point if it goes too far.
Well, that's the thing. You got to go. Oh, he'll be fine. But then, if this is 30 years ago and there's still an incident to happen, assuming the incident wasn't Arnold because that wasn't really public knowledge. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if the incident is like part of the maze thing. Like, as Dolores and William go on this maze journey, this maze adventure, that triggers the incident. And then we see how that sort of unfolds. But I'm liking the theory more and more. And I know some people are dead set against it, but I'd be curious if they still feel that way when they look at all this.
It's funny because you were pretty dead set against it last week.
Last week I wasn't feeling it. This week they presented me. Do you know what it is? It's almost like I don't look for as much evidence as I do reasons why it'd be a good idea. Where in this week I feel like, no, you've given me lots of reasons why I want this to be a thing now.
Yeah.
Logically, there's a couple of kinks still to work out, but you could easily get around that with them tricking us with various things and Dolores being unreliable. So
yeah, it'd be easy to explain either way at this point.
It would. Also worth mentioning that William and Logan have not interacted with any other humans that we know of.
Yes.
There's been the only people they've interacted with is Dolores and Lawrence in terms of characters that we know from the rest of the show.
Yeah.
So
that's actually speaking of it like that way. If assuming all that stuff is in the past, how much have we actually seen Dolores in the present? Not counting the analysis stuff.
Episode 1.
That's what I was thinking. That's it, surely.
I presume that as soon as William was introduced, which wasn't until episode 2, interestingly. They saved that for episode 2.
You know what is interesting as well, though, about that? I know originally it was supposed to be a double-length pilot, and that was supposed to be all part of the first episode, which could have changed things. So then maybe this decision to shift that there was to make this more distinctive there, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Wait, does that mean we've got 11 episodes then, or did they just
I don't think so. I think they just
All right, okay.
shifted it around.
Oh well. I'm wondering then if they swapped scenes between the episodes then to make it work. Because the
Mm.
episode 1 was still longer. It was still like over an hour compared to, you know,
Yeah, it was about an hour 10, hour 5.
yeah. So I'm wondering if they like move scenes around and made it more distinct by doing that and saved William as like the big episode 2 introduction.
I think they might have done. Rather, because you'd think if it was all one episode, you'd cut between them. Whereas instead it was, no, this is one and this is the other.
Yeah. Or maybe it was just too confusing because Dolores was on the loop. So introducing another character meeting her on a loop would have been weird.
Mm. Yeah, that's possible. And maybe that would have made it a bit more obvious if there was a time gap going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I could see some of our episode 2 stuff still being in the present day. Like the stuff with her dad, like her new dad showing up and all that.
Yeah, perhaps.
Maybe the only time it was not present day was the time with William. Like any time it's the same when she's with Teddy, and Teddy like runs off with the people to go and get Wyatt. You know that
Mm.
that that had to have been present day. But then that one doesn't link. That maybe adds a bit more credence to the whole. It's not two timelines, as if that's all linking up. But then again, as we say, she could have when she ran off away from that house at the end of that episode. She could have went anywhere, and the one we see running into William's life could be in the past.
It's also worth noting that when Ford and Man in Black are talking and Teddy's there, he says she was taken by bandits. That's what he's been telling Teddy. Not that she ran away, not that she went somewhere with anyone. She was taken.
Yeah, that's what the Man in Black told him. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just think it's interesting that could play it as one timeline or as two separate, depending on which way he leans on it.
See, I almost took it as if it is the same timeline, I'd say he was lying, but he used it as a trigger to make him care because that's what his character's meant to do.
Yeah.
Or it could actually just be accurate, but it's still a trigger. He's still using it to get him to do what he wants. So
Exactly. It could be either. That's the thing.
jeez.
So much stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Another minor like plot thread is that Elsie, after blackmailing the guy who was having sex with the hosts after dark, which by the way I kind of love that they did that because it makes sense to me that someone would do that at some point. Like one of them would go pervy and try and
Because she even says how there's this rumor that they don't
yeah.
that they don't log it, but they do, which makes me think, oh, people have done this before,
Yeah, but they just use it for blackmail material rather than getting
rather
them in
than
trouble.
report it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a nice bit of world building. It makes sense that this would go on.
Mm.
But yeah, so she finds like a device in the arm of that host that tried to kill her last week, which is sending information somewhere. The exact word she uses is someone's smuggling information out of the park with the hosts.
Yeah, because it was a laser satellite uplink.
Yeah,
Which is you said minor plot thing that could be so important.
well, when I say mate, I mean small in terms of screen time this
Yeah.
episode. It was only a couple of scenes, and once she brings it up, we never hear about it again, and presumably it'll be picked up next week or whatever. But yeah, not minor in terms of the importance later. I'll clarify that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that she takes it straight to Bernard.
She trusts Bernard.
She does, but could he be trusted with it? I mean, who's he going to tell? Will he mention? Because obviously we know he's very close with Ford. Will he mention it to him?
Is he as close with Ford as we currently think?
Maybe close is the wrong word, but he clearly looks up to him. He's almost being groomed to replace Ford. So I feel like he'd want to try and stay in his good books, and
The only reason why I say that is just because I'm just remembering last week, or even 2 weeks ago, when Ford would like, kind of dismiss his ideas and tell him that they're just robots and so on.
Yeah,
It felt like there was like a disconnect between them.
yeah,
I don't know, like maybe Ford recognizes Arnold in him or something like that. You know, he recognizes a similar type of person that's going to go down a similar path.
I wonder if that's why, because Ford seems to be like grooming him to take over his role. He's the one creating them now, and I wonder if he's almost doing it so he can keep an eye on him. And it's like, oh, I recognize that potential path, like you're saying there, and he's like, I want to keep an eye on that and try and get rid of it.
so much in this show to talk about. There really is. Oh dear. Yeah. Obviously there was stuff with Logan and William got on the heist with Lawrence and all. Well, not with Lawrence. Lawrence stayed home, but for Lawrence. Yeah. And all that stuff. I think most of that's, it was fun stuff, but it was more what came out of it through the conversations, through the moments where William steps up, as it were, and takes people out. And
it's cool, but it's not as important as some of this other stuff that we're talking about.
oh, it's not, yeah, absolutely. The episode did not start with Dolores this week. It started with
noticed that as
Ford.
well.
Yeah, it started with Ford talking to that old version, that really rusty old mechanical one that you could fool or it couldn't trick you.
Yeah,
the old bartender guy. I thought that was interesting. He told a story about this greyhound that chased after a cat because he'd been trained his entire life to chase after stuff, but once he'd caught it and got his way, he had no idea what to do.
I think that's leading towards the idea when they do develop sentience, they've been working towards this. It's kind of what they've been wanting, almost.
Yeah, they'll have no idea what
and
to
then
do with it.
Once they get it and they have freedom and free will, what happens then? What can they possibly know what to do?
Even if you strip it back, even in their own plots, like if for some reason, like maybe they're always meant to fail at something, but they succeed. Like then what do they do? Like they're not programmed to.
It's like if Teddy somehow succeeded in protecting Dolores.
Yeah, I guess they just get reset at midnight, but no, thematically that's the kind of the kind of thing he was getting at, and maybe even talking about himself in a weird way.
Yeah,
because he's been working in this park, he's been building it his entire life, and maybe that's why he's finally trying to do this new thing, because he's like for a long time maybe he hasn't known what to do with himself. Like, where does this go from here? What is the next step?
Yeah, makes sense.
Of course, we forgot to mention something. So, Dolores goes through this transformation. She gets new clothes, she gets the gun and all that. And when everything goes down and her and William are trying to escape, she readily holds up that gun and is ready to shoot people. And it was a big deal a few episodes ago that the ones that are not programmed to use weapons can't. It's just physically impossible.
It's also worth noting before, when she picks up the gun for the first time before they go out on the heist, she says she knows how to use it. She knows what she's doing. Yeah,
which again could be like a red herring saying, "Oh, this is after the scene in the future with Teddy where he shows her how to use the gun." But she did terribly then.
See, I would take it the opposite almost and say
she used to be programmed. Yeah.
Yeah, and they removed it because of something she's about to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm feeling it.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel it. Oh dear. Everything with her, William, and that was great though. Like they finally kissed, which again is a very interesting thing because I think most people who go to this park probably just go for it because that's what they're there for, to do whatever they want. Whereas William, of course, has been more reserved and been more humane about everything, and she's the one that kisses him. And I guess
I think makes it way more interesting if he is the Man in Black, given their meeting in the first episode.
Yeah, although it still leads to why is he so awful to her in the future. But then again, do we ever actually see him do anything to her in the future? We see him drag her to the barn. We don't see him actually, Yeah,
it kind of implies it, but maybe that's a red herring. Bit of misdirection to make us think that's what he's like.
I could buy her just cutting into her because he wants to try and see something. But it's not about torturing her, it's about, the mechanics of it, the game, the maze.
I also think it's really interesting, when she shoots the guys, her expression completely changes. She's not thinking, she just stops and looks. She looks blank, almost like, when she goes into analysis mode and everything just drops. She kind of looks like that, where it's just something that she does. It's a reaction, an instinct.
Yeah, and another big thing we should mention as well with Dolores is that she does lie to Ford. She knowingly lies to him, because she talks to after she talks to Ford and she says to him in analysis mode, "I've not seen Arnold in 35 years, 7 months, and whatever." It was a very specific time. I can't remember the exact numbers.
It was 34 years something, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a very specific time, and he says fine, and then we hear her in her head almost either talking to the voice that is Arnold or possibly talking to Bernard later. It's hard to say, but she says, "I did it. I kept the secret."
Yeah, I didn't tell him.
Yeah, I didn't tell him.
There was also something else where she mentioned her imagination, and it was like she'd imagined something that that they hadn't programmed in.
Hmm.
I thought that was quite interesting as well. The
Yeah.
more I talk about it, the more ideas I get.
Yeah, this is insane. I have no doubt we missed stuff. I look forward to the comments. There's always interesting stuff in there from you guys. So let us know what you thought of this episode, thoughts and theories. Have you been convinced of the William Man in Black timeline theory? Are you not convinced? If so, why? Like I say, there's a lot of evidence against it. There really is. But there's also a lot of reasons why it would work and why it makes sense. So by all means, let us know. Like and subscribe as well, all that stuff. It helps us out a lot. Thank you very much for watching. And yeah, we'll see you next time. We're halfway through the season, by the way. That's
I know.
half.
Already.
I
I'm going to
know.
miss this.
I'm going to miss this. Oh well, we'll enjoy November at least, and 1 week of December. So thanks very much, guys. We will see you next time.